What if I told you that the most powerful fish repellent you own isn't in a spray bottle? You didn't buy it at a tackle shop. In fact, you've been carrying it with you on every single fishing trip your entire life. It's your own body. More specifically, it's the giant, fish-scaring shadow it casts on the water. Today we're talking about the one thing most anglers completely ignore, and it's costing you more fish than you can possibly imagine. I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why that perfect spot suddenly goes dead the moment you walk up to it. It's not bad luck, it's you, so I want you to comment right now, be honest. Do you actively think about where your shadow is falling before you make that first cast? Let's get into it. For years, we've been taught the same things. Be quiet, don't stomp around on the bank, don't slam locker lids on the boat. And that's all good advice. We spend hundreds, even thousands, on gear designed for stealth. We buy fluorocarbon line because it's nearly invisible. We use kayaks to sneak into backwaters. We do everything we can to reduce our noise footprint. But we're so focused on what fish can hear, we completely forget about what they can see. The idea of a shadow spooking fish isn't new, but for most, it's just a passive piece of knowledge. It's something you kind of know, but don't actively apply. It's a massive blind spot. Think about it. In nature, what does a large, dark shadow suddenly appearing from above usually mean for a smaller creature? It means a predator, a bird of prey. It means danger. And we walk around the bank like we're invisible, casting that massive danger signal right over the very fish we're trying to catch. It's a fundamental mistake tied to the survival instincts of the fish. Let's start with the absolute basics of fish vision. It's not just about seeing a lure. A fish's eye is a marvel of natural engineering designed for one primary purpose: survival. They have a field of vision that is incredibly wide, allowing them to watch for danger from almost all directions at once. But their biggest vulnerability is from above. This is where threats like herons, ospreys, and eagles come from. For millions of years, evolution has programmed fish to react instantly to any sudden change in light or shadow from the sky. It's not a thought process for them, it's a pure, unadulterated reflex. When your shadow, this massive, dark shape, suddenly slides over them, their brain doesn't think, "Oh, that's just a fisherman." It screams death from above. And just like that, they're gone. They either dart for the deepest water or bury themselves in the nearest cover. You could have the most realistic crawfish jig in the world, but it doesn't matter if you've already triggered their most primal fear. Now let's talk about the specific mechanics of that fear response. It isn't just the darkness of the shadow, it's the movement and the sharp contrast it creates. Imagine you're a bass sitting near a weed line in 3 feet of water on a sunny day. The world is a bright, dappled green and yellow. It's calm. Suddenly, a huge, dark shape quickly blocks out the sun. This rapid shift from light to dark is a massive, sensory jolt. It's the equivalent of a flash-bang grenade going off in their world. Compounding this is the fish's lateral line. This organ detects movement and vibrations in the water, and while we often associate it with feeling a lure, it's also highly sensitive to pressure changes. Your heavy footsteps on the bank transfer vibrations through the ground and into the water, alerting the fish to your presence even before your shadow arrives. So, you've hit them with a 1-2 punch. The vibration from your approach put them on high alert, and the arrival of your shadow was the final confirmation that a large predator is right on top of them. The game was over before you even wet a line. So, how can we start to counter this? The first step is to treat the sun as a strategic tool, not just a source of light. You have to become intensely aware of the sun's position at all times. Think of it as your tactical compass. where the sun is, dictates where your shadow will be, how long it will be, and how dark it will appear on the water. Early in the morning or late in the afternoon, the sun is low in the sky. This is when your shadow is at its absolute longest. It can stretch 20, 30, even 40 feet out in front of you. If you're walking along the bank with the sun at your back, you're essentially projecting a massive scarecrow far ahead of you, spooking fish in spots you haven't even reached yet. You're clearing out the area before you even get a chance to fish it. This simple fact is one of the biggest reasons anglers fail during those prime golden hour periods. They're doing everything else right, but their approach is all wrong because they aren't respecting the long shadow cast by the low sun. Now let's flip that scenario. What happens when you fish with the sun in your face? It can be uncomfortable, sure. You'll need a good pair of polarized sunglasses and a hat with a wide brim. But tactically, it's a game changer. When the sun is in front of you, your shadow is cast directly behind you, away from the water you're planning to fish. You become almost invisible from the fish's perspective. Your silhouette might be slightly visible against the bright sky, but you're not casting that long, dark, moving shape directly over their heads. This single adjustment, keeping the sun in your face, can be the difference between an empty stringer and a career day, especially when you are fishing in clear, shallow water. It allows you to get much closer to your target without triggering that primal flight response. It's a simple trade-off, a little bit of personal discomfort for a massive strategic advantage. You have to decide if you want to be comfortable or if you want to catch fish. For a serious angler, the choice should be obvious. Let's consider the worst time of day for long shadows, midday. When the sun is directly overhead from roughly 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, your shadow is at its shortest. This is both good and bad. The good news is that your shadow doesn't project as far out into the water. The bad news is that it's directly underneath you and it's incredibly dark and defined. This is especially problematic for bank fishermen. If you walk right up to the water's edge to make a cast, your short, dark shadow falls directly into that prime fish-holding territory right along the bank. The fish that were cruising the shallows or holding under an undercut bank are now gone. You have to stand much farther back from the water's edge during the middle of the day. This might mean you need to make a longer, more precise cast, but it's a necessary compromise. The midday sun gives you less room for error. You must be disciplined and resist the urge to creep right up to the edge for a better look. Let's put this into a real-world bank fishing scenario. Picture a small pond or a creek bend. It's a beautiful, calm morning and the sun is just starting to rise behind you. You see some promising-looking structure, a fallen log, about 15 feet from the bank. The natural instinct is to walk straight towards it, get set up, and cast. But with the sun at your back, your long morning shadow is the first thing that reaches that log. You've essentially announced your presence to every single fish, holding there, your shadow swept over them like the wing of a giant bird. So what's the right way to approach? First, you stop 50 feet away and observe. You identify your target. Then you look at the sun. You realize it's at your back. So instead of walking directly at the spot, you make a wide circle, staying far back from the bank until the sun is in your eyes or at least off to your side. Now you can approach that same log and your shadow is falling harmlessly behind you or onto the land. You've successfully reached your casting position without ever alerting the fish. The next critical element for the bank angler is changing your physical posture. Most of us stand tall when we fish. It's comfortable, it gives us a good vantage point, and it allows for a full range of motion when casting. However, standing tall also maximizes your profile. You become a towering, 6-foot-tall figure, easily silhouetted against the sky and casting the largest possible shadow. The solution is simple, yet most anglers never do it. Get low. By simply crouching or kneeling down as you approach the water, you dramatically reduce the size of your silhouette and the shadow it casts. Think of how a heron hunts. It stands perfectly still or wades with incredibly slow, deliberate movements. It doesn't stomp up to the water's edge. By getting low, you are mimicking a more natural, less threatening shape. This is especially crucial when you can't control the sun's position. If the only way to fish a spot is with the sun at your back, then getting low is your best and only option to minimize the damage you're doing. Let's talk about using the environment to your advantage. Mother Nature often provides the perfect camouflage if you just learn to see it. Before you even think about your shadow, scan the bank for natural cover. Look for tall trees, thick bushes, or even a patch of high reeds. These features are your allies. By positioning yourself in the shadow of a large tree, you effectively erase your own shadow. You blend into a much larger, pre-existing dark area on the water. The fish are already accustomed to the tree's shadow. It's a permanent part of their environment. When you stand in it, you become part of that accepted background noise. This allows you to stand upright, move more freely, and get closer to the water's edge without sending every fish for a mile into a panic. Instead of seeing you as an isolated, moving threat, the fish simply don't see you at all. Always choose a casting position that has a good backdrop. Never stand out in the open on a bare bank if you have another choice. Now we move from the bank into the water itself. Wading for fish, whether in a river for trout or a flat for redfish, brings a whole new level of challenge. When you're standing in the water, you are no longer a distant threat on the shore. You are an invader in their home. Your entire body, from the waist up, is a moving tower casting a shadow. And every step you take sends out pressure waves that can be felt from a long way off. All the same rules about the sun apply here, but they are magnified by a factor of 10. If you are wading with the sun at your back, you are pushing a wave of panic in front of you. Your shadow precedes you, acting as an advanced warning system for the fish. You'll constantly be spooking fish that you never even saw. You might hear a splash 20 yards ahead and wonder what it was. It was a fish that saw your approaching shadow and bolted long before you got close. The proper way to wade is to move with painstaking slowness and, whenever possible, to wade upstream and into the sun. Wading upstream is a classic tactic because most fish face into the current, waiting for food. This positions you in their blind spot, behind them. When you combine this with keeping the sun in your face, you become a ghost. Your shadow is behind you, and the fish are looking the other way. This is the ultimate stealth approach. Your movements should be slow and fluid, like a heron. Slide your feet along the bottom rather than taking high, splashing steps. Every movement should be deliberate. The goal is to move so slowly that you don't create a noticeable pressure wave, and your shadow never falls over your intended target. It takes incredible patience, but this is how you get into position to make a perfect 10-foot cast to a trophy fish that has no idea you even exist. It's the difference between walking through the woods and still hunting. Let's not forget about our friends in boats. Many anglers believe that once they're in a base boat or a skiff, the shadow problem disappears. They feel like they're farther away from the fish and therefore less detectable. This is a dangerously false sense of security. In reality, a boat creates a massive shadow, and the angler standing on the casting deck is the highest point, casting an even longer shadow. On a calm, sunny day, you can watch the shadow of your boat and your body stretch out across a flat or along a weed edge. And if you're using your trolling motor to cruise along a bank and the sun is on the opposite side, you are literally pushing a giant wall of shadow along that very bank you're trying to fish. You're spooking every single fish from cover before your lure even gets there. This is why you'll often cast to a perfect-looking lay-down and get no bites. The fish were long gone before you arrived. So, how do you manage your shadow from a boat? The principle is identical to bank fishing. Control your position relative to the sun and your target. If you're planning to fish the right-hand side of the lake and the sun is in the east, you should position your boat so the sun is in your face. This means your boat's shadow and your personal shadow are cast behind you out into the open water, not onto the bank you are targeting. This might mean you have to fish the other side of the lake in the morning and wait until the afternoon to fish your desired spot once the sun has moved. It requires planning. Furthermore, when you stand up to cast, be mindful of your movement. A sudden change, going from sitting to standing, creates a fast-moving shadow that can spook fish. Try to be smooth and deliberate. On extremely calm, clear days, sometimes the best approach is to use the trolling motor to stay a long cast away and use long-distance casting to your advantage. This entire concept isn't just for sunny days. Fish can be even more skittish on overcast or cloudy days. You might think, no sun, no shadow, no problem. But that's not quite right. On a cloudy day, the light is diffused, but you still cast a subtle shadow. More importantly, your silhouette against a bright grey sky is often even more pronounced than against a blue one. Fish are looking up, and they see this dark, human-shaped outline moving along the bank. It's an unnatural shape that doesn't belong. So even on cloudy days, you need to practice the same principles. Stay back from the edge. Keep a low profile by crouching. Use trees and bushes as a backdrop to break up your outline. The rules of stealth don't get thrown out just because the sun isn't shining. If anything, you need to be even more careful because the fish are often more willing to roam in the shallows on overcast days, making them more vulnerable, but also more alert. Let's talk about a specific type of fishing, where this is absolutely non-negotiable: sight fishing. Whether you're sight fishing for bass on beds, stalking bonefish on the flats, or trying to spot a cruising carp, your shadow is your #1 enemy. In these scenarios, the entire game is about seeing the fish before it sees you. If your shadow touches the fish or even passes near it, the game is over. Period. There are no second chances. This is why elite sight fishermen are absolute masters of sun angle and stealth. They will wear camouflage that matches the surroundings. They will creep and crawl on their hands and knees, and they will wait for minutes on end for a cloud to pass over the sun to mask their approach. They treat it like a military sniper stalking a target, because that's exactly what it is. If you want to get into sight fishing, the very first skill you must master is 100% total control and awareness of your shadow. Let's tie this back to lure selection because it's all connected. We often blame the lure when we're not getting bites. We'll change colors 10 times. We'll switch from a worm to a crankbait to a spinnerbait. We'll go through our entire tackle box, getting more and more frustrated. But what if the lure was never the problem? What if the fish never even had a chance to see your lure in a calm, unspooked state? If you've already sent them fleeing for cover with your shadow, it doesn't matter if you're throwing the most perfect lure ever made. They're not in a feeding mood anymore, they're in a survival mood. The next time you find yourself in this situation, a perfect day, with no bites, stop and analyze your own position. Are you casting a shadow over the water? How did you approach the spot? The problem might not be in your tackle box. It might be your own 2 feet and the shadow they're attached to. This realization can save you a lot of frustration. Here's a practical drill you can do on your next trip. Before you even make a cast, just stop and watch. Find a spot on the bank and just observe the water. But as you do, pay close attention to where the sun is and where your shadow is falling. Walk a few steps to the left and watch how your shadow sweeps across the water. Kneel down and see how much it shrinks. Step behind a tree and watch it disappear entirely. Treat this as a training exercise. Your goal is to learn to see the world from the fish's perspective. Start looking at the bank not just for good-looking structure, but for stealth entry points. Places with good backdrops or angles that let you keep the sun in your face. Make shadow management a conscious part of your pre-fishing routine. Just like you check your drag or test your knot, do a shadow check before you ever approach the water. This simple habit will eventually become second nature, and your catch rate will thank you for it. Now let's talk about breaking old habits, because that's the hardest part of all this. Many of us learned to fish from our fathers or grandfathers. We fish the same way they did, walking up to the same spots they did. The thought of crouching, crawling, or taking a 10-minute detour to get the sun angle right might seem ridiculous. It might even feel a little silly. But fishing techniques evolve, and we don't use Dacron line and steel rods anymore. We've embraced technology in our reels, our electronics, and our lures. It's time to evolve our most basic technique, the approach. You have to be willing to unlearn the habit of just casually strolling up to the water's edge. You have to start thinking of yourself less as a person going fishing and more as a predator trying to ambush its prey. This mindset shift is the key. It's not about just one tip. It's about changing your entire philosophy on how you interact with the aquatic environment. You are a guest and an intruder, and you must act accordingly. Does this apply to all types of fishing? What about deep water fishing for walleye or offshore for tuna? In those cases, is a shadow a big deal? The answer is yes, but in a different way. While your personal shadow might not reach a fish in 50 feet of water, the massive shadow and water displacement of the boat's hull is a huge factor. Sudden movements on the boat, like dropping an anchor or a heavy tackle box, send vibrations straight down the water column. Fish in deep water are still highly sensitive to pressure changes and overhead threats. They may not be able to see you clearly, but they can sense the boat as a large, looming presence. So, while the specific tactic of managing your personal shadow is most critical in shallow water, the underlying principle of stealth, reducing your overall footprint, both visual and auditory, is a universal rule of successful fishing in any depth. Don't think you can just forget about it because you're in a bigger boat on a bigger lake. Let's think about the sounds we make in conjunction with our shadow. The two are intrinsically linked in a fish's mind. A shadow by itself is startling. A loud noise by itself is startling. But a loud noise, like a clumsy footstep snapping a twig, followed immediately by a large shadow sweeping over them, is a confirmed threat. It's a combination that tells the fish, the thing I heard is big, it's right here, and it's above me. That's the ultimate danger signal. This is why a stealthy approach involves both visual and sound discipline. You need to walk softly, you need to avoid breaking branches, you need to be aware of the noise you make. When you can successfully approach a fishing spot without making a sound and without casting a shadow over it, you have achieved the highest level of angling stealth. You are presenting your lure to a fish that is calm, unsuspecting, and in its natural feeding state. That is the fish that is most likely to bite. So, to put it all together, what's the ultimate mindset? It's the mindset of a hunter. A deer hunter doesn't just walk through the woods whistling a tune. He plays the wind, he uses cover, he moves slowly, and he stays low. We need to apply that same level of strategic thinking to our fishing. Before you leave the truck, check the weather and see where the sun will be. As you walk to the lake, don't just look for fishy spots, look for hidden approaches to those spots. When you get to the water, your first thought shouldn't be, where do I cast? It should be, where can I stand so the fish won't know I'm here? It's a complete reversal of the typical process. By putting stealth first, specifically shadow and sound management, You ensure that every other decision you make, from lure choice to retrieve speed, is being presented to a receptive audience. You're no longer just fishing, you're hunting. And that's the difference between a lucky day and a consistently successful one. So let's wrap this all up. For years, you may have been your own worst enemy on the water. You've been the reason the fish stopped biting. It wasn't your lure, it wasn't the weather, it was that giant, dark shadow you dragged with you to the water's edge. The most critical, game-changing realization is this: your approach to a fishing spot is more important than the cast itself. If you mess up the approach, the cast is pointless. The poverot, the real turning point, is when you stop thinking about your shadow as an unavoidable nuisance and start using the sun as a tactical weapon. You learn to position yourself to make your shadow disappear or fall harmlessly away from the fish. This one change can fundamentally alter your success, especially in shallow or clear water. It transforms fishing from a passive activity into an active hunt, where you are constantly thinking, planning, and outsmarting your quarry. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you rethink your approach, do me a favor and hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed for more tips that go against the grain. Now, I want to know, what's the one invisible mistake you think most anglers make? Let's share some knowledge down in the comments.